Women that are more empathetic than men thing, it's just sort of a hard thing to say because we have never seen a woman really in charge that much, because we haven't seen women make decisions in wartime or things like that, because they have never gotten the chance to be in power. So really, I don't know what it would be like, because I have never gotten an example from the past.
Maybe they would not create war.
Maybe. I don't know.
Professor Suborno Isaac Bari's plane just arrived in Johannesburg, South Africa. Professor Dr. H.P. Klopper came to the Johannesburg airport on behalf of the Da Vinci Institute to welcome Professor Suborno Isaac to South Africa. Many Bangladeshis and Indians came to the Johannesburg airport to greet with the professor.
Manu pagani supono loayo Yizwa imitana zoyetu gosi.
Academics, businessmen, mathematicians, psychologists, educators, and scientists of South Africa sit in a circle to interview Professor Suborno Isaac Bari, who is known as the god of mathematics. The interview is hosted by Professor Dr. Bennie Anderson.
We welcome you to South Africa and we thank you so much for joining us. You sitting in front, that is Professor Bennie Anderson, a little bit older professor than you. But he is indeed a brilliant mind himself, and he's our executive chairperson of the Da Vinci Institute, and he's in charge of the entire institute. Thank you very much, Prof. Anderson. Over to you.
So the idea is that we will engage, and that hopefully in the short time that we have together, we would leave with some ideas and be connected in a totally new galaxy. Connecting strangers and hopefully take a journey. I think too often we are passers-by and we don't connect. So I hope that you can connect and that some of us can reconnect in the conversation that we will be having. But it is all about the energy flow. So thanks for allowing us to bring you and your family into this intimate circle. There are beautiful minds around the table. Some of them asked to bring a guest with them. So there's also new energy around the world, around this space. Of particular importance this morning is that we want to talk about looking forward and backward at the same time. So I almost want us to stretch our minds like the shamans would do and elevate their mind to the level of the condor, looking at tomorrow rolling in while yesterday is rolling out. So this conversation should not be time bounded. And I hope that we can all stretch ourselves in our discussion to go beyond what is known to us, to an unknown reality. So over time, Professor Bari, you have now become part of a circle of scientists, acknowledged most probably because of your expertise in algorithmic engagements. You can do calculations, you can play with numbers. To a large extent, the world in the last century has been governed by numbers. And to a large extent, in my estimation as a psychologist, numbers have ruled the world. So I'll be curious, as an opening question, to get your perspective of what do you think is the reality of the algorithm in this timeless space of yesterday and tomorrow?
Okay, so I think that I honestly don't have that much experience because I am only 9 and I have not seen the last century. I have not seen how these numbers or algorithms, as you call it, have affected the world. But I think that I have just enough experience to say that yes, algorithms have been affecting the world very remarkably in the last few years, because the algorithm is the thing that drives all our mathematical and scientific calculations. It is and mathematics and science has been really the thing that has been advancing and improving and accelerating in these past few years. But also numbers rule the world in the terms of social media. We have been become a lot more involved with technology, especially our phones and computers and whatnot. In fact, I see we are recording with phones right now, and some people are on their phones. So you can really see the mark that all this math and science has made on our world. You can see the mark that our algorithms and our technology has made. So it has very remarkably ruled the world, and I think that it will become even more powerful on us if we don't try and change something over time. And some people are even criticizing this kind of thing like it's an addiction. But technology is going to make its course whether we like it or not. And artificial intelligence is going to be something out of our control in the next few years, especially because artificial intelligence, we created it with an intent and with some programming lines of code. But consciousness can allow something to do whatever it wants. So all our algorithms might turn into androrhythms. So we really don't know whether our algorithms will continue ruling these kinds of numbers, or maybe the androrhythm will take the throne in the future, and maybe even we will be wiped out by artificial intelligence. So I feel like the algorithm's reign has been long, and this might come to an end soon. But it has been ruling over the world for these past few years, for no doubt.
So do you see the possibility in that line of thinking that as the androrithm rises its head, that it will be able to counterbalance the algorithm? Do you think the algorithm will allow the androrithm to take hands with it?
Well, the algorithm doesn't really have that much consciousness, so it's really a question of whether the androrhythm will let the algorithm still control some of the world. So I think that the androrhythm is going to take over, because androrhythms are much more powerful than algorithms, because they have the capacity to feel emotions that are not programmed. They have the capacity to be aware of what's around them. And we don't exactly quite know what that is yet, but we have that kind of consciousness. We have that kind of androrhythm. And we are taking all of our technological might, or at least some of it, and putting it into this artificial intelligence that is trying to become conscious. And so, I know that humans' technological might is great. I mean, we focused all of our might onto rockets and space engineering in the 1950s and 60s, and in the span of 10 years, we went from staying on Earth to going to the moon. So, I think that kind of thing could be the same way here, because technological might, our humans are only getting stronger in terms of technology. And if we focus all of our strength on something like artificial intelligence, then androrhythms will definitely wipe out algorithms, or androrhythms will outperform algorithms so much that we humans might take them out of the equation. So I think that would be the kind of thing that would happen with algorithms and androrhythms. I think androrhythms will take over.
This is fascinating for me, but so powerful, because we live in a world, and you are now visiting what will be referred to from an algorithmic point as a developing socioeconomic context. And in this developing socioeconomic context, we have proponents, leaders, if you wish, that say, well, until we don't get the algorithm right, the androrhythm won't rise. And this has got enormous implications, as far as I'm concerned, for Africa as a developing context. Because it's almost as Africa is being told we must do catch up with the developed world, And once we've caught up with the developed world in terms of algorithm prowessness, then our androrhythmic discussion can take place. So what would you say to the youth in this world of ours, in this Africa, for whom the algorithm is far removed still? Could they leapfrog by embracing their inner humanity? And how do you, maybe you've got some ideas around that.
Well, Africa, yes, it's still developing socioeconomically, and I recognize that. And I think that algorithms are very hard to develop even for our developed world of nowadays. So even if Africa can catch up with the developed world, then there's still the question of if the developed world can reach the androrhythmic state, at least in our lifetime or our kids' lifetime or something like that. Because I know that technological might is huge, but what is the stuff that makes us aware of our consciousness, makes our animals, us alive? We don't know that truly yet. We can only make functionally programmed robots that aren't aware that they're alive. They just are programmed to do something, and they can't be aware. They can't do something else against the will of their owners. They can only do what they're programmed to do. So I think that this androrhythmic state is still far removed even from the developed world, but maybe if Africa catches up with the developed world, then sometime in the future when the developed world gets to the androrhythmic stage, then I think that Africa will definitely have this kind of artificial intelligence. But the new question is that artificial intelligence going to have a good effect on humans, or is it going to kill us or things like that? Because we have already seen many movies and stuff like Terminator fantasizing about what would happen if we developed artificial intelligence. So not only are we far removed from developing something so technological, but we are also stigmatizing that kind of thing, making it seem like we can't get there, otherwise we will be wiped out by such advanced technology. So I feel like this stigmatization will far remove us from that kind of technological advancement.
That's fascinating. Sachaba, what do you hear?
Thank you very much, Prof. Anderson, as well as Prof. Barry. What I'm hearing is that we need to be more human than we are now, going forward, if we are to embrace what's to emerge for the benefit of humanity and society and perhaps the universe.
Any questions to Prof. Barry?
No question yet.
Okay. So, if you had to think outside of the box, for that matter, and tell a youngster in either developed or the developing world, what would be the things that you wish they could consider to get to this state that you're talking and I'm talking about, where there should be a more awareness? The consciousness is a very powerful yet neglected construct. But what would be some ideas that you may have? But you could also decide to be more private on that and at least say, what could people consider to become more aware of this dance between algorithms and algorithms in the serving of society?
I feel like the more important thing is consciousness is really an outgrowth, or will be an outgrowth. It will be like, I think, a breakaway of mainly technological development. I think that consciousness will be the product of technological development. So I think that we need to make people more aware that technological development in general isn't going to kill us, or we shouldn't stigmatize that kind of thing or make it seem like technological advancement is bad. And we also have our students nowadays communities in schools really disencourage from science. I feel like in schools we discriminate science. We teach all other subjects perfectly, but math and science we just don't teach it well because we just throw equations at people's face without telling them what they mean or giving them a demonstration. And that's mostly either because the school doesn't have enough funding, which the U.S. hasn't been working on, definitely hasn't been working on, or the thing is they just won't give our students an understanding of technology. They're not willing to, and that's what's that I feel what's keeping us back from moving forward with this kind of technology. I feel like we have to encourage our students that math and science is not boring, but another kind of art. Math and science is the thing that will help us advance, not the thing that you need to memorize for your tests so you can get a 105 and not cry to your mom when you get home.
So, I mean, I agree with you completely that schools don't teach it well. But in Africa, one of the challenges that we have is about access to technology for a lot of communities where they're either extremely rural, extremely poor, they have various aspects of not having technological advancements. So in that way, how do you see that we could sort of ignite the spirit of maths and science in underdeveloped communities that maybe don't have the accessibility or the opportunity to technology that others do?
I feel like that's a very important subject. Underdeveloped communities are very common in rural Africa or some very poor countries like I'd say maybe Burundi. And so I think that it's very important to at least try and fund them or at least try and give them some sort of financial support.
Emmanuel, you're a student. So what do you hear? What is your voice on this matter?
I was very good at your physics and accounting and chemistry, but I was very bad at maths. So it forced me to cut all those other subjects out in order for me to focus on the math side of school and everything. But I understood physics, I understood chemistry, I could do the equations, I could do the work, but because I was slow on the other stuff, I couldn't pursue that any further, you see. So I think the younger students, they need time, they need more access to the information, because also when you're growing up, the kind of things that you portrayed on television and what you watch, and it has a lot of influence on the knowledge that you have once you're at school as well.
Well, I think that it's very interesting how his outlook on things is, because yes, I find it very interesting that he was able to understand the physics and chemistry from his perspective, but he wasn't able to pursue it any further. And I think that his perspective on how schools teach it, they make it difficult, or they automatically assume that if you're good at something else, then you're bad at math or science. I think that is very true, and I think that I have seen it a lot all around, this kind of feeling, this kind of weird feeling where if you're good at something else, or you are simply not a big brain genius, you cannot do anything sort of mathematical or scientific or anything like that. And that's a very bad outlook on science, because anybody is supposed to be able to do science. Science is just another kind of form of art. It's observation and imagination. But the thing is, we don't get observation in schools mostly because of underfunding, and we don't get imagination because our teachers aren't creative. So we need more funding from our government, and we need more creative and passionate teachers. And I think we have that, but we just don't allow the passionate teachers to stay, especially in the U.S. You will just suck all the passion out of the passionate teachers because of really corrupt educational system.
Gianni, from a business perspective, I'll get to it now. It is interesting to see how Professor Bari almost transitions that with so much ease, that business, science, and art are all interlinked. Do you have any other views that you want to add here?
Well, the reflection that comes to mind as I listen to you, Professor, is what you mentioned just now about passionate teachers. I think the danger perhaps is that our teachers are being pigeonholed into having to adhere to certain checkbox kind of teaching, whereas one could discover.
So indeed emphasizing the holistic remarkability of being human.
I think that it's much more fun to really discover. I think it's much more fun. The pursuit of knowledge is much more fun than just somebody telling you to your face something like, I don't know, biology or mathematics. I think that it's much more fun to let your student discover what you want them to learn instead of just telling it straight to their face. So, not tell. It's a common classic in writing, but we never use it in math and science.
See, you had a question?
Thank you. Thank you, Prof. Ben, and thank you very much, Prof. Barry. It's truly an honor to be here and listen to you. A spectacular mind indeed. I'm still on the problem of consciousness. My first encounter with this problem is when I was still heavily involved in software development. I was maybe 16 or 17. And I built an algorithm which I called an ant farm because I wanted to program ants to become self-conscious, so to speak, in a little canvas. And I discovered that the problem is it's actually, I eventually gave up trying to sort it out because I had to create all sorts of permutations when they're hungry, what they need. I had to essentially create an entire universe of ants. Just to maybe rehash my question, is self-preservation or the need for self-preservation a hindrance for technology development? Thank you.
Thanks.
I feel like self-preservation as a hindrance to technological development. When we get too far in and we start thinking about AI and algorithms and that of the like, I feel like it might serve as a hindrance, but also technological development is not necessarily always good. We can always use technological development for the better, but when you have consciousness, then AIs might have feelings too, and AIs can have feelings of brutality. AI can try and wipe out humanity, because if you give an AI this sort of thing, this sort of goal, if you give an AI feelings, then it will either pick brutality, because that's what we humans naturally picked back when all you had to do was survive and not, well, have to be in peace, and the things you did now didn't affect the things you did later. But now we live in a kind of environment where that sort of brutality is outclassed. But I feel like the same kind of development will happen to AIs. And so when we begin developing AIs, they will have this kind of need to kill, need for brutality, and we still sometimes do, hint war. And so the thing is, I feel like AI will have this tendency to try and wipe out humanity if it sees that that's blocking its goal. If an AI wants to do something and the human gets in the way, then what will happen to that human, we don't know. It's like on the road. If you have a car and the human gets in its way, you don't know what will happen. So it's the AI is kind of like the same thing. So I think that this kind of principle of algorithms and self-preservation, I feel like, that would definitely sort of be a hindrance, but technological development would not necessarily be good at that point if self-preservation is being endangered by technological development.
I just want to give you a hug as a mom. I think you deserve a hug. You're so amazing. I mean, just listening to the conversation that you've been having, The one thing that stood out for me right from the get-go, and Dr. Kunin actually started with dark and light, and we've been talking about duality all the time. So, and just based on the androrhythms and the algorithms and all of these things, I would like to understand from you, how do we integrate all of this to be more holistic and more integral in what we're doing? Because we're looking at things in isolation. And for me, that's where the imbalance starts to happen. So I would like your opinion on that.
I feel that bringing together these opposites like algorithms and androrhythms, humans and AIs, it's actually extremely hard without one destroying the other. Because we humans see ourselves as more important than other organisms, say like animals, but AIs may see themselves as more important than their creators. AIs may think of self-preservation as their threshold too. So, they may see humans as a threat or endangering themselves. So, I feel like it's extremely hard for humans and AIs to be together without either humans powering off AIs in the early stages of development or AIs killing off humans in their final stages of development. So, I feel like it's extremely hard without one annihilating the other to combine them and live in harmony. But who knows, maybe this kind of duality will be okay for us, and so maybe this kind of duality is going to change our world. Because a few hours ago, when I was still talking with Professor Bennie Anderson, he was mentioning this kind of thing about how crises can affect our communities nowadays. Crises can help us turn better. And so I think that is a very interesting point, and maybe a kind of crisis between humans and AIs could cause our communities to improve, both relations between humans and AIs and our species preservation. So I think that it's a very interesting subject when you bring up duality, combination of human and AI, or algorithms and androrhythms and things like that. So I think that it's a very interesting subject.
So I think probably what I in essence here, we don't have the answer. We will have to live it, and we will have to experience it. Is that how you see it?
Yeah, I see that we don't have the answer exactly to what the AIs will do once we combine humans with AIs. Maybe we will learn from the crisis, or maybe the crisis will just get worse, and either we power off AIs and our technological development slows, or the AIs just kill off humans. And well, of course, you can see how that one is bad for us. So I feel like it's really just a mystery box waiting to be opened as soon as we start developing AI. And we are already starting to develop it. Just that our AIs don't exactly have the consciousness or that kind of thing now. But they can learn how to do something after failing at it enough times. It's really just trial and error.
See that technology and agents of technology are the real problem solvers, because they can see and experience everything. Isn't that a real challenge to humanity, who gets sidetracked in solving problems?
I think that it will be a hindrance to humanity, sort of, because humanity, as you know, is not good at solving problems, especially when it has to work together with the other people that it has opposed in the past. So humanity is very slow on that kind of problem, and it's very hard to work with our opposition. But when AIs do that kind of thing, AI just completely tries to forget about the past and starts to work together. So I feel like that would be, I think that since AIs can solve problems much faster than humans, not only do they have the power of teamwork, but they also have the power of super computation individually, so they are much faster than even the fastest human brains. So I feel like that kind of thing will be I think that kind of thing will be a real hindrance to humanity if AI starts to oppose humanity. So,
what are the implications for your business, Zane? Sorry, Marla, you first want to comment. Sorry.
I wanted to comment, but I'll comment after.
So I think the implications for our business are huge, because especially when you say that the moment we look back in things that oppose each other, we don't do well at problem solving. But I have another question for you. So firstly, I should say welcome back home, because you know that Africa holds the cradle of humankind. So this is where you really belong, so you should come home soon, I hope. So the first thing is that when you look at Africa as a continent, it's a rich continent. Its youth is 60% of the population is 60% of the population is youth, and then of course, it's very resourced as a continent, and the whole world is looking at Africa. It's been invaded many times, not successfully though. However, when you think of the consciousness that we hope for through algorithms and algorithms, do you think that that consciousness will close this divide that we have between the first and the third world?
I want to say that's almost a bit more of a geopolitical question.
I don't think so, because we already have the consciousness right now, and we can think about how others are affected by our decisions, but our first and third world are still not working together. First world countries neglect our third world countries, and even in our past, our countries have started to abuse the African continent. Europe and most has really been at fault for dividing the continent. You know, the European scramble for Africa. So I feel like the first world and third world have not had good relations, and even with our consciousness nowadays, things still haven't gotten that much better. So I don't think that it will be much improved, the relations between first and third world, even by consciousness. The first world and third world have not had good relations, and even with our consciousness nowadays, things still haven't gotten that much better. So I don't think that it will be much improved, the relations between first and third world, even by consciousness.
I'm not sure, Dr. Zain, that's what you want to hear. Dr. Tarani, what does the wise man hear, and what do you want to reflect a bit on this discourse?
Education improving in the African continent. I'm not sure. You fail to pass matric well, and you try to get with your F. There was an F pass in the past. You try to get everywhere, and then when you go back home and you say to a family, I haven't found placement, they say try teaching, and you find placement. Now, the person who doesn't understand the concepts is now entrusted with teaching others to understand the concepts. And I've been a victim of that. I went into a class, Prof. Barry, and I was told, you want to do maths. How many Professor Barrys are we missing in the African continent? Who some people call them mad in their own village because they can't understand them. Once even told me that the richest place in terms of wealth is the graveyard, because there are so many people who have died without even identifying their God-given talent.
So any comment on the challenge of talent?
Yeah, I feel like there is so much talent that goes wasted, not just in Africa, but I feel that in general, the educational system has so much wasted talent. The point that Dr. Mabunda brought up is really nice, because I think that there is so much wasted talent in the education system, and this wasted talent is never coming to fruition because we don't allow people to imagine, we don't allow people to use their imagination, and we don't allow people to find their own passion, their own love. We instead just push them into the fields and subjects that we think are mandatory, and we don't give them the amount of in-depth, either we don't give them the amount of depth they want. As for people like me who are crazy about math and science, there were probably millions of other people who are just like me, have this passion in math and science, but I have been taught well, and I have a great school, but many people don't really have that kind of access, and some people don't even have access to education. When I was on the plane like 2 days ago, there was this advertisement about thing, an organization that would give education to kids who were out of school, who didn't have access to school. So this kind of thing, there is so much talent that goes wasted because either they don't get quality education, as there is for most schools, or they don't get education at all. And so this kind of talent is wasted because these people are not able to find their own passion, their own love. And so I think that kind of subject is a very nice one brought up by Dr. Mabunda. Also, I'm slowly being convinced by Zane that empathy is actually going to win over the world, and the first world is going to help the third world. But
have a view on that?
well, I think the gender equality is just as important as racial equality that has been talked about a lot, especially in Africa. It has been talked about a lot and put down a lot of time. Equality in terms of sex, I think, is also a very important kind of discussion because women have been pushed down for years, and there's this kind of stigmatization, and women are kept at home because they have always been thought of as housekeepers, people who don't have any sort of job except to be at home to take care of the children while males do all the real work. And that was actually how it actually worked back in 400 or the days of the Roman Empire, I'd say. Back then, all the women had to do was stay at home and feed the children. They had no sort of job, and still women are sometimes turned down in countries that don't have this kind of sense of equity. So that is a very important issue, and I feel the gender equality in terms of women being pushed down is actually a very important issue, and that it needs to be fixed and focused on just as much as racial equality. And so my views on gender equality is that it still needs some fixing because it had been neglected. Racial equity, we have been trying to fix it, especially here in the West for the past few years, but gender equity has still not been touched on because the gender equity wasn't as big of an issue back then. But now it's really becoming an issue because now we need futures. We need more people who are geniuses. And some people don't have the opportunity to do that because they are women and they don't have the time or money, or they are always turned down by others because of this kind of issue. So we are getting so many geniuses and hard workers that are being turned down just because of this gender equity issue. And this sort of connects into what Dr. Mabunda has said about wasted talent. So I feel like it's a very important issue and should definitely be touched on in the future.
So I want to, typically in a Da Vinci style, take the discussion on this matter to a different level, Professor Bari. So could you consider that when we talk gender and gender equality, that we could be trapped in a duality where we think of males and females? Do we see an emergence of other genders?
You can say you don't have an answer.
Well, I think that's more on a biological perspective. The evolving of another gender, another kind of chromosome. I think that's a kind of weird subject that we should not touch on, and maybe it would have the sort of effects that, and maybe it would have even worse effects than the sex equity things we have now with women being pushed down on men. If there was some kind of secret third gender, then that would be stigmatized even more than this kind of thing already. So I feel like that would be a very weird issue, and we should probably not touch on it right now.
So having raised the red card, I think you must consider when you and Dr. Zane meet in 20 years' time that we may have maybe a proliferation of genders, and there may be 4, 5 or 6 genders. And then it will be interesting to see what is the equity profile on that. Because again, it's the evolvement of humanity. So it will be, it's interesting, and thanks for your response on that one. Dr. Tarani?
Prof. Barry, how would the geopolitics of the world be if, say, 60% or 70% of the leaders were female?
It would probably be, I'd say, a bit more equal. I think that women would have more jurisdiction, and maybe even the kind of sex equity thing or this kind of racism would start to go against men. But I think that it would be a definitely sort of more equal world if 60 or 70% of the leaders were women. In terms of sexual equality, I think that would be an issue that would be less touched on. It would be such a small issue that even the Vinci discussions wouldn't touch on it, I'd say. Maybe this kind of sexual issue or gender issue would go against men instead. Because, well, if the majority is a woman, then of course there will be this kind of jurisdiction of women over men. And maybe this kind of thing will turn the tables. But of course, neither kind of thing is good. I don't see white supremacy is good or black supremacy is good, and I think that thing is similar for the gender issue. So maybe it would be a better world if those were leaders. Maybe it wouldn't be. I think that equality is good for all, especially here in South Africa. I am honored to see this noble fight for equality and how the blacks didn't want to just get over the whites, but blacks wanted whites to be equal in a rainbow nation, to have this kind of not opposition but family, this kind of sort of friendship. And I think that kind of thing is important in racial and gender things as well. So I think that kind of equality is more important. And if 60 or 70% of the leaders were women, say, then I think that that would maybe make that imbalance. That would make that imbalance flipped, but it would still be a very big imbalance. If 60 or 70% of the leaders were women, say, make that imbalance flipped, but it would still be a very big imbalance.
Thank you very much for that. I want us to move. Are there any, or let me move to the next. Any urgent questions, Trisha?
Not so many questions as maybe comments, but maybe they lead to questions. So the first one was on the almost misconception that there's a differentiation between technology and then maths and physics, or maths and science. The two are very much reliant on each other, and it's interesting that there's a divide between people, or an assumption that there's a divide between people moving away from maths and physics at a school level but rushing towards technology, not realizing at their core they are really linked, right? So that's the first one. The second one is I'm really intimidated by talking to such a young professor, and I forgot my second question. So let me pause there and come back.
When he's not thinking so much.
Yeah, that's maybe a fair point. But so let me pause there, let him answer, and then I should probably remember the next one.
Do you want to respond to the first question?
I feel like that is very important because technological advancement is dependent on math and science, and people were eager to get better technology back in the days when we couldn't just get food for free, when we couldn't just get free food, free water, and we had to actually work we had to use actual non-digital maps, and we had to plan out our routes instead of just entering 2 locations on Google Maps. So so the thing is, back in those days, we were more reliant on maths and science, and we were able to see that connection, so we were more eager to do these kinds of things, to volunteer math and science, to do math and science things. But now, people just don't have that kind of, people don't have this kind of dependency on math and science anymore. Instead, they are dependent on technology, but then they think that there is no relation between math and science and technology, and then since we are stigmatizing math and science and making it seem like only the geniuses can do it, then they are rushing away from math and science and rushing towards technology. And now we are not only stigmatizing technology, but we are also making it so we can slow down technological advancement, because we are slowing down mathematical and scientific advancement. So I feel like that's a really I think that's a really nice discussion, a really nice line of thought.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. Barry. My second one is the almost agreement with our education system, right? The idea is, if I am having a 9-year-old child myself, look at the homework that she has, and I have brief flashbacks of me doing the similar sort of thing when I was in school. Now you're looking at a system 30 years later where we're teaching the same sort of curriculum and the same sort of outcomes, right? But expecting different results. That doesn't make sense, right? The idea is, and I've always been a believer, that if we teach things like curiosity, it will lead to where we want to go. So, and there's innovation based on 2 trains of thought, necessity and curiosity. And I think if we foster that insatiable curiosity at a school level, you might get to where you want sooner rather than later. That was the first one I'd like to comment on. And the second one is, so we have this incredible debate about AI and the future, whether whether humans will consume AI or AI will consume humans. I think my question is a simple one. Do you think it's worth it and we should still pursue it?
Alright, so for your first comment, Einstein once said that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. And so the second, my response to the second thing is that, yes, I think it's still worth it to develop AI, because it could have immense consequences in the favor of humanity, and we might just be missing out on that by stopping its development. Because AI could help us colonize our galaxy, and AI is like trying to engineer another sort of human. Sure, it could have brutality, but it could also have empathy. I mean, that's what the Zane discussed. So I feel like it could also have massive consequences in the favor of humanity. So I feel like AI is a sort of gambling thing, and I feel like AI is a sort of gamble. So you don't know what you're going to get, and you don't know if the consequences could be insanely good or insanely bad. It's like betting at $1 million. It's like betting $1 million and then gambling it all away. Except this time it's the entire life of humanity.
Okay, I want to go to a last round of discussion. Professor Bari, you also have very specific views around science and religion. So you already, indicated that, certain red flags. So if it's not a red flag, can we talk a bit about that? Where do you see and how do you see the interplay and the effect of religion versus science?
I feel that, like, in our world nowadays, religion is that thing that's going to win over, because the effect of having different beliefs is, like, massive nowadays. And religion is the thing that fuels anger, because if you see somebody has a different belief and they really believe in it, some people get angry, and some people get so angry that they want to kill for it. There are already many religious groups who do that. Unfortunately, many of them come from my religion, Islam. So the thing is, this kind of thing, this kind of belief, this kind of different belief fuels lots of anger in the religious community. However, in the scientific community, that kind of anger cannot foster, because either there were nice, polite arguments about facts, or there were just conspiracy theories. And the conspiracy, the latter, is not very big. And so, there was not a lot of hate or anger being fostered in the scientific community. But we all know that hate is what garners more attention. Hate is what garners the media. And hate is what wins over in today's world. And we need to change that. We need to change that so we have empathy for one another. But for now, religion is starting to take the lead, because it's the thing that engineers more anger than science. And if we get more anger, then there will be more people who are involved in that, and then more people who get so angry that they kill others. And it becomes this kind of negative feedback loop that is eventually going to be bad if we don't change science for the lead. So I feel like it's not a red flag, but actually something that's very important nowadays, and something that we need to change before it's too late. Kind of like global warming.
Can I get any reflection on this comment? Anybody? Yes.
Thank you.
Young men, you are a breath of fresh air. I've got 4 children, and before I get into the conversation, I just want to ask you, what's your favorite ice cream? Chocolate ice cream, cool. So, how would you comment on there are only 2 constructs, the construct of love and the construct of fear? And depending on where you're sitting in your construct, so your maths and science will be.
Okay, so I want to get it. So the construct of love and fear, and you want to know, is there a relationship with your construct of math and science? That's intriguing.
Well, I feel like the concept of love is very is sort of intertwined with math and science, because we have a lot of respect for one another here in the scientific community. And the thing is, math and science is what fuels change, but love doesn't really get on the headlines. Neither does math and science, because people are more interested in debate, hate, anger, things like that, and that's what gets on the headline. You see, you usually see science articles on the front page of the newspaper. The only time you see something even close to that is when there's been some big revolutionary discovery, like probably AI in the future. And I think and probably the last time a sort of scientific article was on the front page was when we landed on the moon. But still, this kind of thing doesn't get on the headline, neither does love. This kind of hate or hatred, you see, that is what gets on the headline. Or fear is also something that gets on the headline. So I feel like it's a real parallel between this kind of thing with religion and politics, and that's what gets on the headlines, and that's why you see that kind of thing all the way on the front page of your newspapers. And so you have this kind of thing, math and science, and that's kind of one of the reasons why math and science is pushed away for another time as a topic that's not of current debate, but for all the geniuses out there and all the nerds who don't like politics. So it's kind of seen as that kind of thing because it doesn't generate that kind of hatred. But I feel like the love is something that we see a lot in the mathematical and scientific community. We sometimes love mathematical ideas, but fear is also something we really see in religion. So I think that nicely parallels the religion and science thing that we just discussed a few minutes ago.
Thanks, Trevor. Here's a comment and then...
I'm bringing things down to basic levels. So, so you've got a mom, right? And I really believe that women are very nurturing and caring, and men are just as nurturing and caring, which they need to bring it out more often. But from your experience, you have a mom and a dad. Who would you say is more empathetic and more nurturing and more caring?
Interesting. So first of all, I know Thatcher wasn't very empathetic to the Argentinians. Since I'm in a really caring family, I think that my answer would be both. And so that's always why I mindlessly just say both whenever they ask me that question. I was ready to go to 4th grade, but my principal decided to test what level I was on with a grade level test, and you can guess what happened. And so they...
Talk about women being more empathetic, men being different, and that could be because of what's expected of women and what's expected of men. And also there are certain things that are expected of children. Now, if those expectations are changed completely, do you think we would have a lot more children like you in the world?
I think that children should not be underestimated. We should not think of them as infantile. We should not limit their skills based on their age, but we should also not overestimate them. We shouldn't make them feel overwhelmed. Otherwise, they will just fail, they will just faint. And I honestly think that if other children were held up to my standards, the standards that I have right now, then it would be honestly overwhelming. We should should not underestimate children's talent. Too many children's talents have been wasted. Their development is hindered if we don't show them that they have their own talents and things like that. What Dr. Mabunda touched on earlier, but I think that children shouldn't be underestimated. They should not be limited based on their age. They should be limited based on how well you teach them. For example, I was ready to go to 4th grade, but my principal decided to test what level I was on or with the grade level test, and you can guess what happened. And so they... So I decided to take the average of 4th grade and my score, and so I decided to go all the way to 8th grade because I wanted to take the spelling bee, but I also wanted to make my school day a bit harder because I didn't want to just sit around in a 4th grade classroom all day feeling just really bored. So I went to 8th grade, and the thing is, that shows that just because me or another child is 9 doesn't mean their education or their development should be limited to the 4th grade curriculum. They shouldn't be underestimated, but they also should not be overestimated. If you have a child and you don't teach them well, and then you just throw them into some kind of, if you throw them into some kind of tournament or spelling bee, you don't expect them to do well because you didn't teach them well. You have to have a good teacher in order to get a good education, and I feel that that's what school does. It just pushes you into most schools just push you into really bad classes, and then what they do is to take a really over expectation from you. So the thing is, they have your over expectations, and in fact, I have seen so many comments saying, imagine what is happening to his cousins who are expected to be just like him. Yeah, so you shouldn't underestimate children, but you shouldn't overestimate them too. So I think that's a very interesting topic. I have seen that kind of conspiracy theory. Bill Gates wants to put that chip in your brain way too many times already. I've seen that way too many times. And well, I think that once you hear it enough times, it starts to become a part of you. That didn't become a part of me, but it still really annoyed me.
You're taking my mind a bit off track, but let me go on that and say, do you think COVID, however, not being new really, but having emerged the way it emerged, also should make us as humans aware of how we have created an imbalance in the universe?
I feel like that's an interesting subject. How we create an imbalance in the universe. I feel like we don't create an imbalance of in the universe because we basically are nothing compared to the universe. I know this gets a bit self-existential, but we don't really mean anything in terms of the universe because we are just this tiny speck on our tiny planet, in our tiny system, in our tiny galaxy, in our tiny cluster, and it just goes on. And then when you start zooming out, you really start to see that we don't really have any effect on the universe as a whole. We don't really have an imbalance, and there are probably thousands of other civilizations that are very far away, but also have advanced just as much as us, or even more than us. That kind of thing. So this, I think, really shows that we don't create an imbalance in the universe because we basically can't even do anything relative to the universe.
Okay, that's very powerful. So let's jump with that argument then to climate.
Females more empathetic than males, and what if they were in charge? That was my question.
Very interesting, and I think that is a good question. Women that are more empathetic than men thing, it's just sort of a hard thing to say because we have never seen a woman really in charge that much because we haven't seen women make decisions in wartime or things like that, because they have never gotten the chance to be in power. So really, I don't know what it would be like, because I have never gotten an example from the past.
Maybe they would not create war.
Maybe. I don't know.
I really believe that women are very nurturing and caring, and men are just as nurturing and caring, which they need to bring it out more often.
Well, May, if I ask this, in your history before you, or when you were in a different realm, there was a woman leader called Maggie Thatcher.
Oh, Margaret Thatcher.
Yes. Do you have any views on that in terms of what you commented now?
Oh, so first of all, I know Thatcher wasn't very empathetic to the Argentinians. He wasn't leader in war, so I don't honestly know what we would see if there was a woman in charge, people like that in power, and I don't know what I would see, but I don't know, but maybe I would suggest they would be a bit more empathetic, but I'm not sure. I'm not going to lean on any side, because I know that there's going to be a very...
Mr. Barry, he is completely enthralled. He's got a huge smile on his face, which is a testament to how much he's, completely enthralled, like I was saying, and I think he loves you very much, and your mom indeed. If you look at Serena Williams, same thing. They had a father who saw a talent in them and went out of their way to drill and create the conditions for them to become among the best. I don't know too much about Tiger Woods' history, same thing, right? And you look at Mr. Barry and Mrs. Barry, I would like to believe that your father is a mathematician, and so similarly, he saw something, and they created also the conditions. I'm not trying to take away from, obviously, the talent that you obviously have, right? I'm wondering whether, to the point that Dr. Mabunda was making earlier, whether being able to spot the talent is where it actually gets lost rather than the education system itself. So in other words, if we even as parents can start trying to spot the talent, whatever it is, could be maths, it could be sports.
I feel that that's a great statement, because I think that all people have some sort of hidden talent, whatever it is. It definitely doesn't have to be math and science, and I know some people that just don't feel like math and science is their thing, but are also talented in other things like art or stuff. And I think that all people have that kind of talent, but that talent can't be released if the people around you don't nurture you, don't teach you well. If the people around you don't care about you or your talent, then how is your talent even going to grow or emerge? And so I feel like all people are born with this hidden talent, but only some people have it emerge from them. Others just don't have the teacher or the right teacher for them to nurture them to get their passing out. So I feel like that is a very interesting subject, and I think that all the children have a hidden talent, but they just can't unravel it unless they have a good teacher.
I'm standing just because, so when Dr. Naka called me Dr. Kuhnen, I wanted to say, please don't. I think many of us feel today that we don't indeed want to be called by our titles anymore, because you really are astounding. You are absolutely remarkable. But I want to start off by saying, I know a lot of people have asked about, and you have mentioned it as well, about the balance in your life. And at Da Vinci, we've got a lot of stuff that I spoke of as the cooperative engagement. But in Africa, we speak a lot about Ubuntu, which is, I am because we are. And when I asked your father about how he ensures that you have a balance between childhood and, which I know Dr. Naka asked you as well, between childhood and between the adult world that you traverse, and we've spoken so much about dichotomies today, you answered me, Mr. Barry, in a way that I really think shows Ubuntu. He gave me all the ways, which I will share a few of them with you, of how they ensure that he has balance. But most importantly, he said, and everybody around us helps us. Even people like you at Da Vinci, Dr. Mabunda, who's having them over, etc. It's about the sharing of the raising of such a brilliant child. And I think, Mr. Barry, and to your wife as well, and to your brother who's standing there in the corner, I think it's very important that every single person in your family and your extended community helps to harness your remarkability. So from that perspective, just to put your mind at ease, Dr. Naika, is his parents chose for him to go into the 4th grade so that he could play amongst 9-year-olds when it came to, I think you call it recess in America, and that he could play games and do things of fun like that. He tested, and he should have been, as you can imagine, in grade 12. But the reality is that he chose grade 8 so that he could have that immersion between them. So definitely learning some of the fundamental social skills at a level that is more appropriate in terms of age, but your brilliance is being used around the world at different universities. And I hope for you that you always remember the curiosity of an inner child, because we've spoken about innovation, and even as adults, we should never, ever forget our curiosity, because it's what makes us innovators. Connected to what you spoke to, Vusi, and challenged us about being self-preservers. I think the world is self-preservers, definitely, but if you speak to people, you should have turned the question round and asked people like Dr. Mabunda, who came from very difficult beginnings and built himself into who he is today, and Dr. Reddy as well, and there are numerous other people in the Da Vinci family who have really done that, because self-preservation is important in order to ensure that you are able to actually harness your remarkability to some degree, but it is about the sharing or the cooperativeness of it. So you can remain selfish and keep things to yourself, or you can take with you that African principle of Ubuntu and say that I am because we are, and I cannot keep all of it for myself. I must share, and what we speak of at Da Vinci is we say we must co-create sustainable societies. So that is what I hope from your ant farm that we can also understand in terms of things, that self-preservation is part of who we are, but it shouldn't be the ultimate part of who we are. So altruism should play, only partly a role. And then in closing, I want to say that because you are a professor in maths and physics and calculus, everybody thinks that you can answer any questions. And as somebody my area of expertise is in the field of communication and journalism, I want to teach you a trick and to say to people, no comment that is outside of my scope of knowledge. I find it fascinating that people want to ask you about everything, and that I hope you always remember that you're an expert in a specific field, and it's okay to sometimes not be an expert in a field. But you answered our questions remarkably, and you really tackled each and every one. And I think the reason your dad smiles with pride, and if I'm not mistaken, he's also busy with his PhD, which I'm wondering if you're assisting him with. Am I correct, soon to be Dr. Barry? And I think for me, that you always keep you've got this sort of childlike exuberance that is still harnessed when you make your jokes, that never leaves you, that ever leaves you. And then lastly, to say to you that the circle that is here now, when you become our laureate and we award you this evening, I hope you remember that we speak of the Da Vinci Galaxy, and I know you said it is insignificant technically, but for us, every single student and alumnus of our institute becomes a star within our galaxy that can create their very own constellation that is unique to them. And you will be part of our Da Vinci Galaxy, so whether our feet are in a dusty road in Limpopo or somewhere sitting in America with you, we hope that you will know that you are always looking up to the same night sky, and that you will forever be part of our academic home as you have joined our academic home. So thank you very much, everybody.
Brought to you by Brilliant.org.
Bari Science Lab to fall in love with math and science.